it gives me greatest pleasure to have been here in midst of you, and it gives me greatest pleasure to meet Dr. Baker again after I met him in Montreal, Switzerland, the last yoga festival. I have not much to say to you now, except I give you my blessings. You will be hearing the thundering speech of Dr. Baker. And whenever he talks, he doesn't merely lecture, he goes into ecstasy. He forgets himself. The only aim of his is to bring home to the minds of the people what he has experienced in his life. Every word of his is a real gem. And many of you, I think, will take part in the coming yoga festival in London. Definitely you will enjoy his speech, not only his speech, his instructions, how to transcend this physical body, mind, intellect and ego, and to be one with the universal God. With this, may God bless you with long life and happiness. My blessings to Dr. Baker.
Subject of initiation and its practical applications, how we ourselves can take the kingdom of heaven by storm. This afternoon we said, the journey is the goal. So many people wander around bewildered, seeking for the goal, where in fact they are at the goal. For the goal is the journey, and we are on the path. We are participating in that journey, and it is the goal. I said this afternoon that that journey is a hard one. It is a hard path for those who must transcend the physical world and make their vehicles undertake hazardous tasks which are against the usual laws of their survival. It's very hard. A man who is struggling towards the winning post of a long race is a man that is doing everything against which his body is crying. The accumulation of lactic acid in his blood, the lack of oxygen, the excessive carbon dioxide are all screaming to him to stop. But he goes on. And in a similar way, when we short-circuit evolution, when we must, as it were, undertake hazardous paths which are against our normal accepted standards of survival, then it is a hard way. And this path involves a three-way track. The passages of energies into the head region where lies the Sahasrara, overlying, as it were, that tiny little but so important gland, the pineal. The pineal gland, we should consider that in a moment, with its planet, Uranus. That other organ of perception, spiritual perception, the ajna, two-petaled lotus, which again must be a center of attention. The outer major center, which again receives energies from lower focal points. This is the path. This is the goal. And when I said this afternoon that it is a threefold path, I meant just this. The path of sacrifice, the path of concentration, the path of meditation. I pointed out that sacrifice involves a strange occult procedure. When one man sacrifices himself for another, and perhaps that other's wife and children as well, he automatically creates a larger entity in whom he lives and moves and has his being. If you or I give ourselves to our nation, we are part of that nation. We are part of a greater being. I am that nation. I am that community. I am that group. And because I am that which is bigger than just me on my own, I am susceptible and receptive to the energies not of a mortal being, but of the energies of a huge entity. And I must have the chakrams to bear this. If I form a company, I am the heart center of that company. And I must have a heart chakram that must take the load of all the workmen who form part of that company. My head chakram must take the load of all the business arrangements involving those with whom that company will deal in business. People forget this when they enter into service to mankind. They forget that what they sacrifice for, those whom they help, form part of a greater being. When we do serve another, when we do sacrifice for another, we breathe for another. If I go out to lecture, for this is my chosen task, I am breathing for those that I lecture, and we are part of a community. When I do that, my ultra major chakram, which lies in close apposition to the two little carotid bodies lying at the bifurcation of the carotid arteries in the neck. There they are, the external carotid artery and the internal carotid artery, with lying between their bifurcation the tiny little carotid gland. That is the endocrine gland related to that chakra. It's a strange little organ. I wonder how many of you have noticed that I drink soda water. Soda water contains carbon dioxide. Every fool knows that. And carbon dioxide is the most precious gas. We so often talk about the usefulness of oxygen. We're inclined to overlook the fact that carbon dioxide is also useful to the body. And that little gland that lies in the neck, on each side of the neck here, between which rotates the ultra major center, those little glands are very susceptible to the level of gases in the blood. It is that little gland more than any that is responsive to breathing, especially when the breathing is rhythmic, or if the breathing is purposeful, ha or ta, the right nostril breathing or the left nostril breathing. All these factors affect not only this little gland but the chakram between it, but especially when the breathing mechanism of the body is devoted to another, is devoted to a larger being than ourselves. How can we explain these things in physiology? We can't. But believe me, this is true. And when we serve mankind, when we breathe for mankind, this chakram becomes radiatory. Slowly but progressively radiatory. The chakram in the neck, the ultra major center. And so when I say the journey is the goal, and sacrifice with rhythmic breathing, doing rhythmic breathing as we do sacrifice, that is part of the journey. When we learn to concentrate the mind, we learn to unfold this chakra. And whereas we are bringing energies from lower centers to this chakra here, the ultra major center, when we open the Ajna center, we are drawing energies from the heart into the brow. Concentration, ladies and gentlemen, you would only believe me that just as an endocrine gland with a hormone can change an animal in metamorphosis, focus of the mind can change you. There are immense, what factors should I say, metamorphological factors, the factors of metamorphosis that can change your shape as a spiritual embryo concerned in the act of focus. And one must learn focus in many ways. My spiritual diary is filled with ways in which I have been taught how to focus, how to learn to focus the mind so that the mind can, as it were, spiral into a central point of rest. There are many ways of learning this, and I shall give you a few here tonight. Concentration. But no concentration, of course, is perfect unless it is a concentration on something within the body. Concentration on a rose that is opening is all very well, but in the end one must concentrate on something within the body. Otherwise the concentration is valueless. And what we can put in the body is visual concepts. We can quite easily, if we wish, build in mental substance. It's not hard, ladies and gentlemen, to clear the mind. You heard in my seminars on meditation how to withdraw inwards, how to find a focal point within the body which will take up your concentration, your awareness, so that you won't listen to sounds outside the body, so that you will learn to clear the mind. And then you can start to practice the glory of building with your mind, for this is a God-given factor. Men are called gods in the making because they are creators. And we can create with mental substance. And mental substance is far more real than anything material. From these things create he can forms more real than living man, nurslings of immortality. Remember the great symbol of Uranus. Uranus, which is the symbol of the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, and also the symbol of the Sahasrara chakram. The symbol of potency. Potency at two levels. Primitive man with his capacity to create at the lower level. Here is a man. The most important features of him demonstrated: the upright arms, the legs, and the diaphragm. The upright arms, the legs, and the diaphragm. That below the diaphragm belongs to animal man. That above the diaphragm belongs to divine man. Below the diaphragm, the organs of procreation. The miracle that man learned to perform on this earth, reproduce himself. By friction, by fire, by friction, so man learns to throw part of his seed forth into fertile soil, and that part grows and reproduces him, the symbol of potency, Uranus. But there is a higher symbol too, not yet depicted in the symbol of Uranus, and this is man above the diaphragm. This is man again with a creative potential, now creating not in physical substance, but creating now in mental substance. And again, when men create in mental substance, there is friction of these organs, the higher counterpart of the lower. Man must create a seed thought. The seed thought is valueless unless it is projected forth into the fertile region of some condition on the earth where that seed thought can grow and become some enormous monument to mankind and to the one that created that seed thought. The seed thought of an architect that produces a huge ramification of buildings. The seed thought of an idealist that produces an international movement like the Red Cross. A seed thought now is possible, whereas previously only there was the seed of the lower nature. And man must learn to create, for he is a God in the making, and to create at this level. I have taught you ways in which this can be done. steady the mind, and then it is not a far cry to be able to coax into the mind a color, just a color, any color you wish, and then to shape that color perhaps into a figure, a triangle, the symbol of the soul, as we saw earlier, the upper triad. And then to build and build again with a substance until one can build esoteric formula, symbols of importance, always learning to do this within the mind. And when one is able to concentrate on what is visualized, and at that moment, that precious moment, to breathe rhythmically, superconsciousness. I can't tell you anymore, there's nothing else to say. But do it! To visualize, to fashion with the material of the mind symbols of importance so that you can focus on the symbol visualized. That is it. The threefold path. The threefold path. And with the unfoldment of these capacities, the power to visualize, the power to focus on what is visualized, and the power to breathe at that critical moment, brings the rider into such a position that he is able to hold the three horses on which he is astride. And this is the chariot of initiation. And this is the path that must be taken. If you could only understand that breathing is an important act which sends out links automatically to these other chakrams and brings them into the orbit of the breath. See what I mean now with regard to other more mundane things. Breathing, the use of breathing. Breathing reinforces every action in the body. Mental, emotional, physical. Breathing will reinforce it, whatever that act is. Let us take some examples of how we could use the breathing to control our various vehicles and to make them ready for initiation. If I wish to make my body whole, to heal it because it is not whole, I must, as I would perceive my body as being whole. And so as the Buddhists would say, perceiving the body as a whole, I will breathe in. Perceiving the body as a whole, I will breathe out. Similarly, calming the emotional nature. You have an emotional upset. This is unacceptable to the soul. The quicker that this emotional disturbance can be removed, the better. You can do this with breathing. Calming the emotional nature down, I will breathe in. Visualizing just this, that my emotional nature is being calmed, rested, quietened. Visualizing again the calming of my emotional nature down, I will breathe out. Both of these are important. Visualizing this as you breathe in and visualizing it as you breathe out. Bringing all those three head centers into rapport with each other. Serenely feeling, I will breathe in. Serenely feeling, I will breathe out. Blissfully feeling, I will breathe in. Yes, you can visualize states of bliss until the traps for those states of bliss are laid down in all the bodies. Mentally, emotionally, and physically in the brain. The blissful concept can be created so that when the flowing of blissful energies comes into the aura, there are tracks established for the holding of that bliss. You are gods in the making. You are creators. You can make what you will out of your vehicles because they are only the outer part of an inner reality. Perceiving a seed thought, I can breathe in and strengthen it. Perceiving a seed thought, I can breathe out, and I can give it life so that it will pulsate, my seed thought, that I'm going to create and strengthen whatever that seed thought is, whether it is concerned with your life and your spiritual development or the life of another. Perceiving the thought connections of that seed thought. You know, it's an old process, a glorious process of taking a seed thought of a lotus or some other symbol and holding it there and immediately observing in the calm mind what associated thoughts come with it. And so we say, perceiving thought connections, I breathe in. Perceiving thought connections, I breathe out. Concentrating on a thought, I breathe in. Concentrating on a thought, I breathe out. Dissolving the thought, a harmful thought, a pestering thought, a thought that is negative, how to destroy it. Dissolving that thought, I breathe in. Dissolving that thought, I breathe out. Some of us have better capacities for these than others. I can destroy a thought in my mind like that, for I have certain ray qualities about me, whereas it is more difficult for me to create a thought in my mind, because I am I and you are you, and you know what you are strongest at. Dissolving a thought, I can breathe in, and dissolving a thought, I can breathe out. Perceiving the impermanence of everything about me, I can breathe in. Perceiving the impermanence of everything about me, I can breathe out. And that perception, the ability to perceive the not real and know it for what it is established within you. And this is how one creates within one's aura. Rejection of attachment to various things, I can breathe in and breathe out. Enough of that. Breathing is a creative act. It reinforces learning patterns in the human brain and in the astral counterparts of that and in the mental counterparts of it. And so we've dealt with the advantages of breathing, how breathing can reinforce every action in our lives. And with this process, we are again increasing the effectiveness of this particular chakram and this one, because each thing we visualize as we breathed in. We need them to be radiatory and to overlap each other. Well, that will bring psychic powers as well. And now, the advantages of meditation and initiation. Meditation guards one against harmful acts and the thoughts of others. Yes, it does. I know people that come to me and say, what about astral attack? What about astral attack? And I say, well, what about it? I don't know what they're talking about. Oh, I've seen it done. But it doesn't happen to me. I damn well see to it it doesn't. And you can, you know. You can do this yourselves. And meditation will guard you against the harmful acts and thoughts of others. Guard you against excessive stimulation from others. You know as well as I do. Some people can walk into your lives and in 2 minutes they've got you upset. Or they can walk out of your lives and leave you depressed. Well, that's attachment, ladies and gentlemen. You are attached to that individual, and you must break it. Meditation will guard you against this sort of thing. These are Buddhist precepts. Meditation lengthens the life. Lengthens the life often through rhythm, through cycles. when one lives cyclically, when one lives rhythmically, one increases the length of one's life, and that's a scientific fact. Because it has been shown quite clearly that people who maintain circadian rhythm, that is the rhythm of night and day, fitting in with an even tenure, as it were, to the rhythm of night and day, they do very well at it. The University of Minneapolis and many other institutes have been studying circadian rhythm, night and day, and its effects on the body, its effects on the glands and the chakrams. Well, not on the chakrams yet, but on the glands, certainly on the endocrine glands, and therefore, by implication, the chakrams. It's very interesting that for centuries we have taught that cycles and rhythms are related to the thousand-petaled lotus, are related to, as it were, the pineal gland and Uranus. Uranus is the great planet of cycles and rhythms, as you know. It also rules the thousand-petaled lotus. We have discovered only in the last 10 or 15 years that it is the pineal gland, more than any other gland in the body, which establishes circadian rhythm, our capacity to live rhythmically within our day and night cycle of the earth. And when men break this rhythm, when they fly across the Atlantic, when they fly around the world, the circadian rhythm is broken, and there are tremendous upsets in the body, and we are worried about this because of its effects on pilots. And of course, this particular chakram is related not only to rhythms and cycles, but it is related to the greatest power of all, the power that most of us seek ultimately, and that is continuity of consciousness. Continuity of consciousness. By that we mean not just to be awake 24 hours of a day, but awake at all levels and all planes. I have continuity of consciousness in ordinary physical conditions. I'm alert 24 hours a day. You can whisper my name or talk to me any time in 24 hours of the day, and I will answer you immediately, which means that to some extent I have achieved here in the lower worlds a continuity of consciousness of 24 hours a day. Many of us break this horribly with an 8-hour gap, which we call sleep. We're unconscious. We're unalert. All masters are alert 24 hours a day at all levels, not just this one, but astrally, mentally, and spiritually. They are constantly alert, and that's what continuity of consciousness means. We can encroach on these worlds in these states. We can encroach upon them, certainly. And these disciplines can often be very, very harsh. The development of continuity of consciousness, for instance. This was thrust upon me. In the war years, it was no delight to be shelled with naval cannon, entrenched in the battlements of Gazala in North Africa. Well, you'll say, why mention that? It meant that sometimes I was awake 4 days on end because I couldn't go to sleep. I was too terrified, along with everyone else. But that gave the capacity for so that too harsh and difficult to achieve. There were other ways in which it was done. I can remember studying in my last year of medicine. They were harsh years for me. Not easy at 42 to do the tasks with your mind what boys and girls half my age were struggling to do. And that was to pass medical exams and at the same time to trudge wards and carry out other normal duties. It was a very harsh time for me. When I went to write my examinations, I evolved a technique. It was not an occult technique that I looked for. It just happened that way. what did I do? I would have an exam in the morning, a medical exam in the morning, 9:30. I would begin my studies the previous day. I would study right through the day, interspersing my studies with walks in the park, certainly. Occasional periods of perhaps doing nothing or just watching television. But I was determined that whatever I put into my mind that day, I would not lose from my consciousness. And I would not go to sleep until after the exam. And I would study all that day, right through the night, poring over my notes, going over them again and again, perhaps having cups of coffee, perhaps, as it were, saving the worst hours just before the exam for having a bath or something like that. But I would maintain full consciousness so that when I went into that exam, I could go back to any part of that last 24 hours and immediately write down what I had revised. Do you understand what I'm talking about? It happened that way. It was the only way that I could get through my exams. It left its mark on me. It left its mark on me. It disturbed circadian rhythm. It did something here. So, to this day, I cannot ever lose consciousness. And this is even extended into the realms of anesthesia. And that is another story. Anesthesia. I wonder how many of you realize that you've changed so tremendously that the drugs that are often prescribed for average man are not the doses that you require. You're all herded together and branded as one. What tests are done on guinea pigs or what tests are done on average man, well, that's for you as well. Don't you fall for that. You are different. You are different in many ways. It's extraordinary what surgery can do, and anesthesia, to sensitive people. I had a dear friend once, a person who was extremely psychic and highly developed spiritually, a lovely person. And he was dying. He was dying of aortic incompetence. His aortic valve was failing. He had contracted rheumatic fever as a child, and every time the ventricle squeezed its blood out through the aortic valve, that valve could not close properly. The blood fell back into the heart, and therefore the heart had to do twice its work, got bigger and bigger. The heart was beginning to fail. I took him up to my medical school, to Sheffield, and it was arranged that in a year's time, if I could keep him going for a year, then operation would be performed on him. We'd put a new valve in. Well, a new valve was put in a year later. He had an extraordinary experience. I knew him to be very sensitive and psychic, but I couldn't foresee what was to happen to him. The operation was a tremendous success. He's alive today, 8 years later, with the same plastic valve in, and doing very, very well. But what happened in the operation was this. They gave him, in the usual way, curara, which relaxed all his muscles so that he couldn't bat an eyelid, he couldn't move a finger. He was absolutely paralyzed. This was a relaxant for the operation that was to follow. Then they gave him the central nervous anesthetic. Not enough for him because he was different. And he was awake and alert through the whole of the operation, unable to move an eyelid in any way to signal to them that he could feel them cutting through the ribs of the thorax. He lived that whole experience. When he came out of it, the operation was a great success. He was grateful to the surgeons, of course, but he never forgot it. The strange thing is, ladies and gentlemen, that person today with a repaired heart, with a new lease of life, doing very well in a factory that I helped him to start, that person is no longer esoteric. He could not care less about esoteric things. Just the placing of a valve, a plastic valve in that heart, had changed the situation completely. Why? We never know. I merely tell you this because when we tread the path, we are different. And you must understand that. When you have one foot in the new kingdom, you are a different being. When you are initiate, you are different. And it's no good pretending that you are not. Now you understand when we say that certain laws that bound you previously, whether man-made or not, are not for you. New laws are required for you. Meditation lengthens life. Meditation energizes. That's the function of meditation, to energize you with higher energies. And meditation straightens out fault lines in the body. Fault lines, blockages. Many people are often enervated, are lacking in energy, not because they don't receive it, but because they can't circulate it. And they can't get rid of it. They're in jobs that aren't expressing their soul's purpose. They are in situations in the world in which they are unhappy. And because of this, the energy that is available to them and flows into them cannot be dispersed. You must find your niche. You must find your soul's expression, your soul's purpose in the world. Find out the ray of your soul. Study the qualities of that ray. Know what your soul would like you to be doing on earth through knowing what the ray of your soul is. And when you do that, when you follow the qualities of that ray, then the energy will flow through you. Meditation will straighten out some of these fault lines. Some of these fault lines that exist in the nadis, in the various tracts of the body, and even where there are blockages in the etheric webs. Meditation removes ill fame and leads to good repute, so it is said. Very true that for some strange reason, you know not why, your mistakes, which should produce the most appalling vicious reactions, often do not. How, I have never been able to describe, but I know that it is in some way linked to the process of meditating. Meditation drives out discontent and calms that divine unrest. No man in this audience will ever be exempt from divine unrest. I'm constantly confronted with people with divine unrest. They can't stick to something, not because they haven't got character, but they know there is something. I must be about my Father's business. That is what fills them, a divine unrest. And the only salve for that condition is meditation. Drives out discontent and calms divine unrest, leads to contentment. Meditation removes fear and insecurity, especially the Platonic meditation. The review of the day's events in the calmness of your mind, the day's events that have gone by and the day's events that are going to come before you. You know as well as I do that if you are emotionally distraught, you are not in a position to make certain important decisions. The time to make your decisions is when, with the assistance of breathing, you have calmed yourself. You are lying there in a condition in which your faculties are at their best. That's the time to review the events that are bound to follow the next day. And see yourself breathing as you do. Seeing myself confronting that situation, I breathe in. Seeing myself confronting that difficult situation, I breathe out. Review the events that are going to come the day in front of you. See how you will react to those conditions that are bound to occur. And when they do occur, be sure that you act in the way that you calculated the night before, when your mind was calm and at rest, and you will banish fear forever. You will be able to switch it off just like that. Meditation removes sloth and generates vigor. Meditation removes greed and envy, hate and delusion. very rare for you to meet a person who cannot be made envious. I sometimes meet it in children, never in adults. I don't know why. You can sometimes meet a child in a situation in which he is being provoked by others, told what he is missing, and that child calmly is able to push it aside. I know somebody in this audience that has that capacity. A lack of envy and greed. And meditation is something that can remove greed and hate and delusion. Meditation destroys pride. Meditation destroys preoccupation with non-essentials. Destroys preoccupation with non-essentials. If you want to tread the path of initiation, you make a list of all the non-essentials in your life and you get rid of them now and quickly. And non-essentials may even include your own family. Not those for you whom you have responsibility as Dharma, your children, no. But you know who I mean. That family that couldn't care less about your esoteric inclinations. Your blood brothers who are no more your brothers, well, you know what I mean. You need to go through your life systematically and remove non-essentials. And meditation will help you to realize what is real and what is not real, what is relevant and what is not relevant. Meditation makes thought one-pointed and gives direction. Meditation softens the mind from hardness. We often, especially after the second initiation, become very, very hardened because the intellect is being energized with Thohat, which is pouring into the aura. I pointed out this afternoon that pride is the great barrier to the third initiation. It comes with the second initiation because the intellect is so energized. Meditation will soften the hardness of the mind. Wisdom lovingly applied, love wisely applied. Say it to yourselves many times. Wisdom lovingly applied, love wisely applied. Meditation strengthens the mind against weakness. Meditation generates gladness. Joy is wisdom. Write it down. Joy is wisdom. The practicing of joy is wise. The two are interrelated. Joy is wisdom. The practicing meditation makes one venerable. Respect for that which you stand for and those with whom you stand by. Meditation gives rise to much profit, it is said. Wealth comes your way. I can speak for that. I can speak for that. I can tell you that wealth pours my way, so long as that wealth is diverted to useful things, to things related to the path, to the establishment of the externalization of the hierarchy on this planet, which is my goal in the next 25 years. And I will spend every penny I have got on that. And the more I spend, the more I know it will come. Meditation gives rise to much profit. The wealth of many things, not only wealth and money, but wealth of true knowledge, knowing, which comes with the first initiation, and demonstrating what you know, that comes with the second initiation. Knowing for certain that survival is a fact, knowing for certain that karma operates, and knowing these in the first initiation and demonstrating them in the outside world thereafter. Very important. We have lost contact with young people today because we can't give them answers. Questions, mothers and fathers are bewildered. They can't give their children answers. Why not? Because they don't employ ancient wisdom. if they explain to a child why he is what he is in terms of karma, how sane that would be. No, we can't. Why not? Because religion has stuffed the child with nonsense, and any suggestions of reincarnation and karma are put aside. Meditation brings exuberant joy. I knew a person who meditated so well, and he used to wander around the garden and wander around country lanes, blending with nature. And I used to say, what on earth are you doing? He used to say, oh, if I just sound my note, I get it taken up by the trees, and it's wonderful. And he wasn't afraid, he wasn't. And I knew very well. But he used to blend his sounds with nature. And he lived and lived and lived and lived because he was nature. He was nature's child, a wonderful person. Pops Clark, we used to call him, of Bulawayo in Rhodesia. Meditation causes delight in the natural and simple things that life has to offer. Delight in the simple things that life has to offer. Meditation points out the one life within all things about you. That is useful practice for a revelation that comes in the fourth initiation. The recognition that everything is alive, and because life flows through you, you are everything because you are part of the one life that fills all things. Meditation destroys necessity for rebirth because all joy derives from within. There is no desire for anything up there. If everything that gives you joy came from within you, you wouldn't look for joy out there or in impermanent things, in new cars, in wealth and things transient, because all the joy that was coming to you was coming from within. And you would not seek for that which is without there. And if it is out there and you no longer desire it, you no longer want it, you won't be reborn. You will come off the wheel of rebirth. There's nothing there for you to want. Equally so, there are 10 precepts of self-discipline which every initiate must observe. Must. Harmlessness. Harmlessness, the practice of it, cultivates dispassion. Harmlessness cultivates dispassion. It also cultivates compassion. Strange contradiction. Harmlessness. If you practice it in your life by thought, word and deed, you will find that compassion will stream into your aura. Injure no living thing by thought, word or deed. Another discipline. Take not that which is not given. Rape it not of any individual. It's so easy when you have these powers. It's so easy when you have streams of energy pouring into you to feel that power and say, damn it, it'll be quicker for me to take it, because I know I can persuade him to give it to me. That's not the way. Take not that which is not given. 3, refrain from unchastity. Refrain from unchastity. Unchastity means pollution. Unchastity means the corruption of the webs. I talked about this afternoon, that if Kundalini is to rise and to rise freely, better do it on this board here. If Kundalini is to rise and to rise freely, then the webs that it must burn must not be thickened. And the webs are thickened only by living unchastely. The spinal cord, and with it, chakrams on the spinal cord, separated from each other by etheric webs at all levels, astrally, mentally, and etherically. The base of the spine chakram. And when that energy of Kundalini the negative aspect of spiritual fire. When spiritual fire, solar fire, is darting down through the third ventricle, in meditation, he is calling to his mate, Kundalini, and she responds to him. She responds from the cave at the base of the spine, from the uterus. She responds and she rises up. And if these webs are thinned, she will rise very, very gently, without pain, without a sense of burning, without stress, without threat to the nervous system and to the brain. But if the related organs to these particular chakrams, if the related organs are fouled, if they are polluted, if they are in any way, as it were, unchaste, they will constantly feed their dross. They will constantly feed their dross into the etheric webs. And though a man may practice meditation, may aspire, if he is unchaste, then these webs will constantly be infiltrated with the excretions of the etheric body. This is where the etheric body excretes. And if that excretion is reduced because there is a chasteness in the person's life, then the web is thinned, and then Kundalini will mount very, very easily. And purification, I pointed out earlier, was at the basis of all initiation. Refrain from falsehood. It's hard. It's very hard. I had a dear friend who began this path with me, Hedley Pocock, a journalist in South Africa, well-known man. We started the path together. He introduced me to the path. Someday I'll tell you about it. And I had to go to medical school because that was the way that I chose to serve my master best of all, to equip myself. And he went off on his way doing his work. I met him a year later. "How are you faring?" he said. I said, "I manage. I'm in a medical school with kids half my age, but I manage." He said, "How do you manage with maths?" I said, "Well, I haven't done maths for 16 years, and they did maths last year at high school. And they're running rings around me, but I manage." He said, "What do you do about the occult?" I said, "I disguise nothing." They say to me, "You write a journal, don't you?" I say, "Yes." "You say that you've got a master?" "Yes, I've got a master." "And he talks to you?" "Yes." "You mean you hear voices coming into your ear?" "Yes, I do." But no one called me a schizophrenic, ever. I had that sort of personality. But Pocock couldn't. No one in his office, amongst his colleagues, ever knew that he was a yogi. It's something that you have to learn to do. Stand by the truth. Yes, I would rather die in the effort of standing by our truths than to give them up any day. Refrain from falsehood. Refrain from any imbibing which leads to sloth of the body or mind, alcohol or nicotine. As I said earlier, I've never smoked. I daren't criticize people who do, because I've never gone through the process of having to give up smoking. I've given up many other things and tried to give up others as well. But there are some things that do loom very prominently in a person's life. And I have people who consult me, many of them. And there are certain things that I notice. And a person who smokes late into the night will not remember his dreams. Now, the fact that they smoke does not upset me. The fact that they smoke late into the night behoves me to warn them that they are on one hand trying to make themselves sensitive, raising their vibrations, and on the other hand they are blunting their vibrations. Now that means that somebody's between the two endeavors. And that is not helpful. And people, if you do smoke, remember that if you smoke late into the night, you can forget your veiled, your hidden life, the vibrations that come from inner space. Refrain from eating at the wrong time, say the Buddhists. Refrain from eating at the wrong times, especially afternoon. What is really meant is, do remember that when you eat, you divert energies. When you eat, you divert energies. And the time to eat is not just before a lecture. The time to eat is not just before a creative act, unless it is an act below the diaphragm, and then you should eat like hell. Strange how that correlation exists. That heavy sexual activity demands tremendous eating. It's true. But if you would be created above the diaphragm, the higher aspect of Uranus, deprive yourself of food for that time. Have your food later. Refrain, it says, from attending dancing, singing, music, and stage plays. What is meant by this? Refrain from them. I advocate them, because unfortunately here in the West, people who tread the path are usually too intense. Too intense. They're usually too intense. Very seldom a person comes to me treading the path who says, I'm a layabout. I know there's another world, but I can't do anything about it. They don't come to me like that. They come to me like this. No, I can't meditate. I know I should meditate, but I can't. I just can't. When I try and concentrate my mind, things well up in me. They're all tensed up. And then I have to say to them, for heaven's sake, organize some play in your life. The Tibetan always says, don't try and create, don't try and strive when the body is exhausted. Go and have your sleep, and then apply yourself afterwards. Similarly, when you are tensed up, go out and walk with the people in the marketplace. You don't have them in America, it's a pity, or do you? You know what I mean by marketplaces? You don't have the English pub either. You should try these. If you come to the festival, just go down a couple of our marketplaces and jog with the people. I was speaking to some people from Dallas only the other day who remarked on the extraordinary feeling that you get when you are in the marketplace jogging with people. This is the sort of thing you need to do occasionally in your lives. Do learn to plan your play. Don't bother too much about planning your meditation, but do learn to plan your play. Because so frequently people become overstrained, become, as it were, so strained that when they are perceiving inner space, it is distorted because of the stresses and the strains involved. No self-adornation, no perfumes, no garlands, no cosmetics. Sweet, isn't it? Don't use a large bed. That doesn't mean stop sharing it. It means that as well, of course. But what it really means is don't spend your life in bed being lazy. We have difficulty with this in the West. This is not our main problem, that we lie in bed excessively. Our problem is that we don't rest enough. And these principles were written for the Buddhists in the East, of course, and a large bed was a luxury. My bed is a functional point for me. Nothing I like better than to get into bed and to have next to me many, many things that I would like to do. When I was in retirement, as perhaps you know, I went for 3 years into the wilds of Philippines, near Cape Town, and lived there on my own. I would sometimes go to bed for a weekend, with the Alice Bailey books on one side, my spiritual diary there, and my lecture notes. I had it all there. It was wonderful. And it depends on your attitude. What is meant here is beware of sloth
and beware of luxury. I must tell you, I had a hell of a time with beds when I do my lecture tours. I have to sleep in a strange bed almost every night. And I pick up the vibrations of people who have slept there before me. It's terrible. Terrible. I will have these experiences, and sometimes they are a little unkind, but other occasions they are just phenomenal. I slept, where was it the other night? In Hull, in northern England. And I slept there, and I had an extraordinary dream in which I was in an aircraft factory, and I've never been one in my life, and there were these great big engine cowlings and Rolls-Royce Merlin engines being tested. And every time they went to them, I went like this, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to stand the noise, and so on. But I gently inquired who had had the room before me, and it had been an aircraftman who was working in the local factory there. And one does. And I know somebody who disbelieved me entirely about this, and they had the same experience later when they were on tour, that they pick up the vibrations of beds that they sleep in. Just use a large bed in case you pick up two vibrations. There is a very extraordinary book circulating in North America. Let me add this to the list of classics, contemporary classics. It's called, of course, The Center of the Cyclone by Dr. John Lilly. There are those that will scorn it and say psychedelic. I'm no lover of the psychedelic. I have given my strongest reasons for people not using this method. On the other hand, this is the spiritual diary of an initiate of the second degree. And never forget it. Get that book sometime and browse through it, because that's for you. If you're going to take initiation, and most of you have yet to take the second initiation, that book is a spiritual diary. It's the story of a doctor, a medical man, who, under the auspices of the United States government, underwent sensory deprivation. Sensory deprivation. As you know, there have been schools of thought interested in sensory deprivation, and the subject has become one of concern as our astronauts probe further and further into outer space. The fact that we can't send two astronauts to Saturn or to Jupiter means that one has to go. We can't give him television. We can't give him these things because each entertainment we would have to give him would involve an enormous amount more of fuel. And so he's going to be on his own. He's going to be in situations in which the sun does not rise and set. He's going to be in situations in which there is nothing to divert his attention. And so many men experimented with this sensory deprivation to find what would happen if, as the yogis say, you shut off the eyes, you shut off the sense of smell and of hearing and of taste and so on. Sensory deprivation. Withdrawal of the senses, that stage which comes before concentration. What happens to a man when this occurs? Dr. John Lilly was told by other scientists that the only possible thing that could happen is that you go to sleep, and that's that. He didn't believe it. He went into a tank, a water tank, in the dark, alone, and there he lay half suspended in the water, unable to touch anything, to taste anything, to hear anything, to feel anything, and lay there for hours on end, so that he was completely deprived of all sensory stimuli. He had sartorial experiences, out-of-the-body experiences, again and again. He had high states of consciousness. And he found what Robert Browning told me a long, long time ago, that in esolepsy, not epilepsy, in esolepsy, turning inwards and ignoring the senses, there is heightened sensory perception. You may have learnt the opposite. I'm sorry if you have. But you are Westerners, and I warn you that if you turn inwards, depriving the senses, you become more alert, not less alert. Not going to sleep if it's done properly. Don't go into the tank, or don't deprive the senses when you're exhausted. Deprive them when you are rested and ready for your meditation, and then you won't go to sleep. The mind becomes alert. The slightest sound is picked up like a blow in the solar plexus center, and you're not hearing with your ears at all. Strange experiences, some of them very wonderful. Lilly did it alone, and then he did what I regard as an act of extreme bravery, though I don't agree with the use of psychedelic drugs. He took the psychedelic drugs in the tank, and his experiences were again extraordinary, and you should read about them. Where he clashes with many of us is that he says that he only knows one thing, that the taking of some psychedelic drugs in certain people changes them, so that they tolerate others, so that the spirit of the brotherhood of man somehow or the other appears in them. Whether this is the way, I wouldn't like to say. I can't recommend it. But what I do know is this, that could be a blueprint of much of what I have written in my diary, my spiritual diary through the years. There are strange sections in here which I have even printed from my own diary in Aquarius, years and years ago. In one such state, he was lying in a state of twilight consciousness, and he talks about a strange process of tiny little specks of light crowding into his cleared mind. He called them, he said they looked like a lot of little insects, fireflies, which came into his mind, and he found that he could program them. He was a programmed computer, though he was a doctor. He could order these little sparks of light to move upwards or downwards, sideways, right or left. Now, it's very extraordinary that I wrote about exactly the same experience that I've had all my life since a child. The ability to calm the mind and to see these tiny little sparks, which I now know to be David's, thought David's, and to coax them in, call them in. They will come down. You can ask them to come downwards or ask them to go upwards. And it's an extraordinary experience. And one extraordinary day, when I got them to come into a group here, I turned them in a circle, and I found they created a vortex, and there was a whirlpool of fire and an experience of superconsciousness. You should read this book. You could find my description of that written 10 years ago in Aquarius somewhere, and you'll find his description of it written 2 years ago, almost identical. An extraordinary book. If I have a chance, I'd like to refer to a couple of other factors in it with regard to initiation. His greatest experience. And remember, you're dealing here with a man with a scientific mind, a computer mind. You can learn an enormous amount from that man who was a doctor. He says the greatest, the most intense experience he ever had, and I say it was the second initiation. In this second initiation, he saw the whole of the universe, not as I described it, but that was my way. He saw the whole of the universe, not from the burning ground, which could have been the retina of the cosmic being. He saw the whole universe as a computer in which he was part of a program. And when he had to go through the programming and see his part in the program of that computation of a universe, he had two guides, one guide on each side of him, who held him in the most stressful part of that experience. You heard me talk about that today, but that is not my teaching. Go to Initiation, Human and Solar by Alice A. Bailey, and you'll see the description there. Precious examples, ladies and gentlemen, of those who have trod the way before you. Know what you're going into, as I always tell you. You alarm me, because you are so like the man in the street and shouldn't be. I'm talking about another world that you're going to go to sooner or later. As I always say, if you said to a man in the street, you're going to Siberia in 2 weeks' time, what would he do? He would immediately go to the bank and say, have you got a branch in Siberia? I want some funds there. I'm going there in 2 weeks. He'd ring up the Holiday Inn. You got a branch of the Holiday Inn there? What sort of menu do they present there? Do I need a visa? I'm going to Siberia. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all going to that sort of country. The undiscovered land from whose bourne no traveller ever returns, says Shakespeare. Do we take any precautions like that, although we're going there for sure? No. The man in the street doesn't give a hell about the laws that are going to govern him when he dies. You should be also concerned with the laws of inner space and the laws of initiation. Know about them, understand them. He has taught me something useful, Lily, and therefore I must thank him, and I must, though he is now dead, I must... Dr. John Lilly, is he not? Is he alive? I'm delighted. Somebody said he was dead. I'm delighted because he told me something extremely important. And this important thing is as follows. One of the most difficult things in meditation is that we find the way, but we need a gentle prod to get us onto the next step of that way in meditation. And if we could program ourselves as we go into a meditation, if we could program ourselves as we go into sartorial states, that would be a great help. And I forecast that I will help you, and I will tell you as soon as I know that a technique will be evolved before long in which you will be able to put a program on a cassette. And when you go into your meditation, when you begin to obtain fetal rhythm, suggestions by your own mouth on tape can come into your consciousness whilst you are in a state of withdrawal. And I believe that many of the stanzas of Diazanism from the secret doctrine, and many of the quotations of the Tibetan are calculated from the book of the old commentary, does he call it, are calculated to act as programming for us in meditation. We say, yes, swap that up and I'll try and meditate on it, but that's damn hard. Easy to get into the meditation, easy to produce the theta waves, easy to withdraw, but then who will tell me what to search for whilst I am within? And if it was on a program, if it was played back to us, after 10 minutes, this voice of yourself came through and said, seek for this, seek for that, visualize life, visualize this color or that, etc. We could program ourselves. Do you understand what I mean? And who is to say this is the wrong way? This is the new age. This is the new age. Already the biofeedback mechanisms are wasteful, useless. All right, they were going to have them at the festival. I had a biofeedback mechanism put on my brain. I was able to withdraw as I had withdrawn 1,000 times and to produce theta waves. And the man was excited. A stream of theta waves. I wasn't even halfway there. I wasn't halfway there and it was theta waves. Ladies and gentlemen, it may show us, these devices may show us, that in the end the horizon is beyond any device. It is a horizon that is much further away than anything we can measure. We must go on. I have never met an initiate in my life who never spent every moment of his day in hard work. If you know of a person who claims to be an initiate, who is not working day and night for the path, I say he lies. The great initiates were the hardest workers we ever knew. Have you ever read anything of the life of H.P. Blavatsky, and you can easily get it? Read what that woman did in her life. And I have met a few initiates. Some initiates I knew have even scrubbed the floors. Well, you'll say that's not necessary. It was necessary to them. I only know this, that the process of initiation for us in the West often involves the hardest labors. Those labors don't have to be physical, not even emotional, but frequently they are all three: physical, emotional, mental, and on top of that, spiritual as well. I never knew an initiate who could rest and sit back and say, my work is done. Last night I quoted an example of a famous initiate. I won't mention the name because she was almost contemporary, a pupil of the Tibetan. She had a few years of life left to her. Her faculties were going fast. She already could not use her eyesight. Her hearing had gone. She had a few years left. She could do nothing of her normal work. What should she do? The answer came, and she did it. She took onto herself a most horrible disease, and she deliberately spent the last years of her life in agony, shouldering something of the pain of the karma of this planet, as Jesus shouldered some of it, more than his share. And there are ways in which you will find you can express yourselves, not usual ways, but never think that initiation brings a period of utter, complete rest and calm, for it does nothing of the sort. And when you tread that path, ladies and gentlemen, of initiation, how they help you. They cannot identify themselves always. You have to tread it alone, granted, and it is not an easy path in darkness up a mountain face, as you know. But it is a path that is often lit with the most extraordinary experiences. How was I brought on? How did he dangle before me ass-like a carrot? Yes, ass-like. You use the word ass in America. Or is it arse? I don't know. He dangled a carrot in front of me, and I needed a carrot many times. And the carrot he dangled in front of me was the carrot of alchemy. Why not? I had done it in previous lives. Why not again in this? The lure of alchemy brought me on. The lure of alchemy. It's always a fascinating subject. To think that if you have a particular aspect of the divinity, not all of us have got all the aspects. I have one of them, too much so. Will, shocking. When I was learning the Great Invocation, and there were two ways of learning the Great Invocation. There was the way of learning it for sounding it in the world, and all of us know the Great Invocation. When I used to come to the last line of the invocation in the inner planes, which is a different way of learning, do you know there's a difference? If you could only sound some of these mantras when your bodies are sleeping, what experiences you would have. If you could only sound some of the great music, the songs that the world has loved when your body is asleep, what experiences you would have. To sound the Great Invocation whilst your body's asleep, sounded in the mental world, if you could see the Davis streaming towards you and taking up patterns which indicate in some way to you goodwill, You could feel the gentle prodding of a master as you falter over the line, and you do falter right at the beginning. What experiences you would not have. But there was one part of the great invitation that was denied to me. Let light and love restore the plan on earth. Let light and love restore the plan on earth. And he would join in with me the last few lines and glory with me in saying it, the master I mean, of course. But when it came to let light and love and power restore the plan on earth, he was not there for the word power. He was there for the words light and love. I needed no stimulus for the word power. Do you know what I'm talking about? Of course. Of course. And we must recognize these things. And will is needed in alchemy. The ability to project the mind and to allow that stream of the mind to carry as a superimposed wave perhaps from you, from where you have obtained it, to the nucleus of the gold atoms that you are trying to reach. What experiences. It's a pity that it all blew up. Nearly killed me. Fire in the Grate, the meditational sessions, and then an explosion. And that was the end of my alchemy. No more, Robert Browning said, that's enough. But it did many things to me. It helped open chakrams and helped me with many, many things. I wonder whether you ever get a chance to look at English mysticism. English mysticism. Oh boy. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Have a look at it sometime. You can come to England and have a look at Glastonbury, which was the old Isle of Avalon, where King Arthur had his court. You will find many things of interest in English mysticism. It was the age of chivalry. It was an age that was depicting the esoteric, in which knights put on their armor, their shining armor, which represented spiritual purity, purity of the body. The shining armor which the knight donned represented his purity. And he searched for the Holy Grail, of course, as you know. And none of them found it. None of them found it outside of themselves. They all found in the end that they were the Holy Grail. They were the cup that was to receive the grace of God. The downpouring of the spiritual essence was into them, if they were sufficiently pure and they stuck by their laws of chivalry. And that's all the esoteric is. Those laws that I bored you with not 10 or 15 minutes ago were there for a purpose. They are the rules of chivalry for those treading the esoteric path. And when you practice those rules of chivalry, the armor becomes shining, the knight is eligible, and there is a downpouring into him. I didn't come here to tell you that. There is something else. There is a wonderful story of King Arthur, who is the master, of course. And there are the knights. But you know the story is of Excalibur, his sword. And Excalibur was buried in a stone, embedded in a stone, and no one could draw it out from that stone except King Arthur. And King Arthur drew out Excalibur and used it in his work. Ladies and gentlemen, people often say to me, how do I contact the master? And I have to give the same answer all the time. I always say to them, when you have two qualifications, the master will give you. You are Excalibur. You are Excalibur. And the master would use you whenever you are ready. When you fulfill those two qualifications, what are they? You need to be an instrument, a weapon in the hand of the master. The master requires a weapon with which he can hack down materialism. hack down the entrenched thought, activities, dogma of this material world. Will he use you? He will, if you have these two qualifications. If you are freed from the stone, are you free? Masters will not stand in queues for your attention. A master will not stand behind somebody else asking for your attention. If you are attached to things, if you are attached to people, the master cannot use you. You must break your attachments. That does not mean that you must not fulfill your dharma. You must. Your obligations are your obligations, and you must fulfill them. And whilst you have heavy dharma, the master cannot use you, and will not. Even if you were to try and deny that dharma, he would not use you. Free yourself. It doesn't matter if it takes you 15 or 20 years. If you have children 5, 6, 8, 10 years of age, you still have 15 useful years in which you can prepare yourself in another way before you are the free instrument, freed from the stone. You must be free, and the test is, as I've said before, usually emotionally. Are you free emotionally? Can you say to yourself, if the master called me and wanted me to go to the end of the planet, am I free at this moment? Emotionally. No. Very, very few people are free emotionally. To go and be on your own for 6 months in a foreign land, on your own, night and day, how many of you can live on your own for long? I wonder. Are you free? And the second requirement is, are you as an instrument sharp, or are you blunt? And most of you are blunt. You are unequipped. Your swords are not shining and sharp. The master cannot use you. How will he use you? Some of you can't even damn well type. Don't come to me all the time. I'd love to come to England. I'd love to do anything that you say, any work that you like. Well, oh yes, fine, all right. Perhaps we can use it. What can you do? Well, will I serve? Yes, but how will you serve? Well, can you write English? No, I wasn't very good at English. I can give you lots of lectures. They need to go into articles, to go into the journal. Can you put them into English? Rate the English that people will read and not just push aside? No, I can't do that. You'll have to give me something else. As you go through the list, and they've got nothing to offer,